And this morning, to start us off, we're going to hear from writer Michael Coady.
The music that we most love tends to be that surrounded for us by circumstance and association. We hear it mediated by memory and touched by love and loss. My mother died last June. She'd been a musician, born in Waterford, and it was from her that I first came to know Handel's Messiah, the much-loved work that was part of her musical background, just as the Victorian world of William Vincent Wallace and Maritana was. Her father was an accomplished baritone, as well as a barber, a billiards player, a bookie, and a photographer, and her mother a pianist and organist who was also a soprano. One of my mother's potent memories was of the time she played violin as a young girl with the Waterford Instrumental Society for a performance of Messiah. This was in the Protestant cathedral, and her grandmother insisted on her wearing a miraculous medal under her blouse for her soul's protection. I thought of this a couple of Sundays ago when I was present in the fine parish church of St. Mary and St. Michael in New Ross for an afternoon performance of the Messiah. It was a special event, celebrating the centenary of the church with Our Lady's Choral Society, professional soloists, and the National Sinfonia Orchestra conducted by Princess Odin. In the aftermath of my mother's death during the summer, I found it especially moving. And yet another association was evoked when the young trumpet soloist, Eamon Nolan, rose to play his part seemingly effortlessly on the high D instrument in the aria "The Trumpet Shall Sound." As a former brass player myself, I can appreciate how much nerve the player needs, along with technical assurance and musicianship. Long years ago, I recall attending my first ever Messiah when I was an almost broke student in Dublin. The performance, as I recall, was fine, until the trumpeter rose to fanfare our hope of resurrection, when "we shall all be changed." The poor man's nerve and lip failed him disastrously on that excruciating occasion, and the public humiliation of it must have gone on to haunt him. But Handel's great work abides, above and beyond all accidental circumstance. When the composer responded to the invitation of the Lord Lieutenant to visit Dublin, he was at first delayed by unfavourable winds, but arrived from England on November the 18th, 1741. Handel, aged 56, was by then bankrupt after some disastrous operatic ventures. But in his satchel he carried the 265 freshly handwritten pages comprising the score of the Messiah, composed in a miraculous outpouring between August the 22nd and September the 14th of that year. The Dublin of the time was by all accounts a city of considerable musical culture, though in a country which had just suffered the great frost that began on the last day of 1739, and the terrible though almost forgotten famine and plague which followed it in what became known as Blian an Áir. The triumphant premiere of Handel's oratorio at Fishamble Street on the 13th of April 1742 was "for the relief of prisoners in the several jails and the support of Mercer's Hospital and the charitable infirmary on the Inn's Quay." The association of the work with charitable causes would continue around the world in countless performances over 2.5 centuries. And there's also the association with Christmas. Now and then you hear dilettantes grumbling about the Messiah being too often performed, while other music is neglected. There may be truth in the latter point, but the Messiah is a great and popular work, embodying profound drama, rich melody and electrifying rhythm, along with deeply spiritual texts. On the recent Sunday that I was moved by the Messiah in New Ross, I went on later on the same evening to a concert given in Clonmel by the Tipperary Millennium Orchestra, with combined Tipperary choirs. The programme included the Hallelujah Chorus, so I found myself rising to my feet for the second time that day, in obedience to the custom said to have been started by George II. The dilettantes probably disapprove of this as well. Personally, I'm all for it. Why should not all rise to the great yea-saying sound and chorus? Remember Yeats. How but in custom and in ceremony are innocence and beauty born.
Behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible. The trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed, and we shall be changed. this mortal must go and this mortal must the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible. The trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed, and we shall be changed. And we shall be changed, and we shall be changed, and we shall be changed, we shall be changed, and we shall be changed. And we shall be
Nathan Berg, bass, and the solo trumpeter was the English trumpeter James Geechee, members of William Christie's illustrious group Les Arts Florissants, and that's from their complete recording of Handel's Messiah with William Christie himself conducting. In our quiet quarter this morning, we also heard from Michael Coady.